Hi guys, good evening. Sorry if I'm panicking you because I'm a minute or two late. I was just wrapping up another collab that I was on with another group, but I am here, all yours. So welcome. It's nice to see so many of you online. Okay, so let's just have a look. Who do we have this evening? There's just one or two students I see that are still joining, so usually takes a moment to find the link and get into the classroom. Okay, so I think I did post on your announcement that what I would be having a look at this evening is to go through the answers to your first assignment, so that you can have a look at not so much numerically what the answers are, but that you can have a look at what the, if I say ideal in inverted commas, layout of your answers should be, how you should present the answers. And then you'll also be able to see where you did get things wrong. You can actually then see what the answer should have been, or what your calculation should have been, or how you should have answered a question, so that you can then learn from this feedback session on assignment 1, so that by the time it comes to assignment 2, you are more versed in how to go about what they're actually looking for in your answers. Let me just quickly grab something down here. Okay. Just have too many papers on my desk. Okay, so just before we go through and have a look at that, I just want to kind of like just give you a bit of a fix as to where we are now and what we're going to be, where we're going, what we're going to be doing next. So today is Monday, and today is the first day of week 8 of the semester. So that means we're exactly, well, by the end of week 8, we will be halfway, because there's 16 weeks up until the exams, 12 weeks where you're supposed to cover your learning unit modules, 4 weeks of exam revision, so 16 weeks in total up until the exams. So we're almost halfway there by the end of this week. So that just gives you a fix so that you can kind of work out where we're going to go. So also, just to make sure that you know where to focus your attention over these next couple of weeks, is that assignment 2 is what we're working towards now, and that is learning units 1 to 4. So you'll see that assignment 1 was learning units 1 and 2. Assignment 2 says 1 to 4. So in other words, they are still including learning unit 1 and 2 in assignment 2. And the reason for that is purely because in accounting, we can't do LU3 is VAT and source documents, and learning unit 4 is recording cash transactions. We can't do those activities if we don't know how to do VAT calculations, markup calculations, GP calculations, if we don't understand the double entry system of debits and credits, if we haven't learnt the rules of the accounting equation and what we debit and what we. So in other words, everything that's contained in learning units 1 and 2, but specifically learning unit 2, you have to know that in order to be able to do learning units 3 and 4 and to be able to complete those exercises and those questions. So you might find that while you are working your way through learning units 3 and 4 for your assignment, that you quite often are referring back to your learning unit 2, accounting equation, double entry system, what's a debit and what is a credit, etc. Okay, so you should be expecting to do that. So just don't panic though. Your questions will be focused on that chapter and cash transactions chapter. Okay, so that's what it means when they say assignment 2 is on learning units 1 to 4. And then obviously when you do come to the exam at the end of the semester in June, that will cover all learning units. So literally in the exams, there will be a question on every single learning unit. Probably not so much learning unit 1, because that's just a little bit of background introduction theory, but every other learning unit will have questions focused on it. Usually the exam is 6 or 7 questions long. Okay. And if you guys download a couple of past exam papers, which are available to you in the e-library, on your student hub, I know you by now, I'm sure you know where the link to the e-library is. If you go and have a look there, there's a specific link to past papers, and you can type in your, that code at the top of this page is incorrect. Type in the code, as I've typed it into the chat box there, without the W, for exam papers, because the day students, full-time students, and part-time and distance students, you all write the identical exam papers. And then also have a look at, I hope I've got this code right, the module book 5111, and any exam papers uploaded to that code are also applicable to your INAC 5111. They'll be the same. Okay, so if you're looking for past papers, those are the module codes to type in when you're doing your search. Okay, so I did get a query from somebody earlier on today, and I hope the students have all discovered that your marks for assignment 1 were released earlier today. So if you haven't already had a look, then either now, if you've got another, if you can open another tab, or afterwards, go to your grade center, and your marked assignment will be available for you to download. And then you download it and have a look. You'll see all my red marks on it where I have marked it, and you'll be able to see what you got right and what you got wrong. So if you have had a look at it already, the marking system that I use just to make it easy to use the online marking is, if you see a tick, that generally means 1 full mark. And if you see a capital M for Mary, that also means 1 full mark. If you see a red dot, that indicates a half mark. And if you see a lowercase m for Mary, that also indicates a half mark. So I allocate the marks as they are given to us in the memo. We have to stick strictly to the way the marks have been allocated in the memorandum, and sometimes a half a mark is allocated and sometimes a full mark is allocated. So a method mark, the capital M, means that numerically your answer was not correct because somewhere in the question you made an error, but your method was correct. In other words, you did the correct steps to arrive at the answer that you got, even though numerically the final answer was incorrect. So at VC in accounting and finance, we use method marking, which means, some of you also know it as work with marks, which means that if you guys get a wrong answer and you carry that answer down further on in a question, we then take into account you only lose the mark once where the initial mistake was made, and then after that you won't lose any further marks. Okie dokie. Before I go on to open the memo and start looking through that, has anybody got any questions? Also, let me just say, if you guys have got any specific questions related to a query with the marking of your assignment, then just let me know in an email or a message on Learn, and then I can deal with that one-on-one with you, which will be easier than trying to do it online with everybody else as well. And if you have got a question with the marking, you're very welcome to ask. There's no formality about that. You're not allowed to not challenge marking. Sometimes mistakes creep in, or if you don't understand why you lost the mark somewhere, then please ask. It's the only way that you'll learn. Okay, Monique, that's a good question. If the learning units have a due date, so what VC used to do, and I see they're actually going away from that now in the module outline, is they used to give you a guideline to say by week 8 you should be more or less working on learning unit 3 or whatever it happens to be. But that's merely a guideline, what we call a pacer, just to give you some kind of an idea of more or less what learning unit you should be working on now in order to stay up to date, to be able to cover all learning units for your learn. But there's no due date. There's the only thing that you've got due dates for are the actual assignments themselves, and then obviously your US tasks, which at this point you've got one due date for all 4 of your US tasks, and that's the 26th of May. And your assignment 2 due date is a long way from now. That's only on the 7th of June. I don't know why with you guys you've got this massive gap between the first assignment and your second assignment. But that's fine. That gives you plenty of time to work up until the end of Learning Unit 4. And then remember, we will have our NSS session for assignment 2. That's going to be on the 30th. Oh, sorry, I pressed enter by mistake there. NSS session, just go back there. NSS session for assignment 2 will be on the 31st of May, which is more or less 1 week before the due date. So what you should aim for now is between now, today, the 17th of April, and the 31st of May, which will give you approximately 5 or 6 weeks. By then, you must have got to the end of Learning Unit 4 in your studying. We'll then, on the 31st of May, have the NSS session where I go through suggestions, etc., information to help you, and go through the assignment questions itself to make sure you understand everything. And then 1 week later, your assignment is due. But obviously, you want to start working on the assignment even before that NSS session, so that you know what questions you've got to ask me and what things you, because in that NSS session, you've then got me available to ask anything about the assignment that you're not sure about what to do. Okay, so that's in terms of your pacing and where you should be. Jamie's question, Monique, yes, it is being recorded. Double check. Yes, it is being recorded, and it will always be uploaded afterwards for you guys. And when I do upload it, I'll always send out an announcement so that you know that the upload is there. So Jamie's got a very good question, and that says, do I have any tips for accounting as a new learner? And Jamie, you are definitely not alone in that boat, because INAC 5111 is very much a beginner's accounting stroke bookkeeping module, and it really is aimed at beginners, a way to practice accounting. And my answer to you is very simple, and that is, I can't remember if I've already done it for this learning unit or not, where I went through, what I'll do is in the next collab that we've got, which is going to be the 24th of April, I'm going to show you the link between using the learning unit information on Learn and your textbook. So in VC, these Edge textbooks that you guys use have got for this module in particular, but all of our accounting modules, we use Edge textbooks. These textbooks are brilliantly written to, if you're a self-study student at home, which you guys are, with these textbooks, you can guide yourself through each learning unit. And the only way to do it, and it sounds silly, is to start right at the beginning of each chapter to read the introduction. For instance, here, let's go to Learning Unit 3, which is where we're going to be starting our next assignment. So if you go, for instance, to page 75, which is your VAT and source documents chapter, you must, there's no information in here that is just there for show in these EDGE textbooks. Every word and paragraph and section you should read before you go on to the next one. So you will read 3.1, what is value-added tax and how does the VAT system work? When you've read that, then you will work your way through example 3.1 on page 76 and genuinely work through that example. The examples are really good in the EDGE textbooks because they are there to demonstrate the principles that you've just read about in the previous paragraphs. And then at the end of the examples, they generally have a question, which then gives you the opportunity to try a question to practice whether you've understood what you read and what you saw in the example. And when you've mastered that question, you then go on to the next section. So for instance, you'll do question 3.1 on page 79, and that will, hopefully by then you will have understood what is VAT and how does the VAT system work. Then you'll go on to page 80, the next section, VAT supply categories, which by the way is very, very NB. Page 80, put a big circle around that and a big circle around VAT supply categories. You'll be using this all the way through this entire, INAC is only one semester, but if you do any more accounting or financial management, you will use VAT supply categories. So make sure you understand that one. So then you'll go to page 80, you will read through standard rated, zero rated, exempt suppliers and non-allowable items. Those 4 categories, when you've understood them and you've read the lists of the different examples under each, then work your way through question 3.2 and 3.3, particularly question 3.3, because that will test you. Have I remembered which category these different types of transactions will fall under? So in that case, question 3.3 is very NB for learning VAT categories. So as a beginner accounting student, what you've asked me, these are the steps that you must take. So what I'm in essence saying is there is no shortcut. You have to work your way through bit by bit. So for instance, in your learning unit 2, there's definitions, your bookkeeping cycle on page 18. You have to understand that. It's not just a diagram you can flip past in the textbooks. It's actually a very important diagram. All the questions at the question 2, super important. And then this is how you work your way through each chapter. And then when you get to the end of the chapter, there's always longer questions there. And it's essential that you do as many of those as you've got time for using your workbooks, because remember, you've got a workbook that comes with your textbook. And this is the way that this module is constructed, so that if you work methodically through the textbook, all of the questions using your workbook, trying to complete those questions without looking at any solution until you can get them right, then when you sit down for that exam, there's absolutely no ways that you will fail. So, and I usually write this in announcements, etc., for all the accounting students, is in a nutshell, there's no shortcut. Practice, practice, practice with the examples and the questions, and there's no ways that you will fail. But you will have to invest the time. No other way around it. And as you go through those questions or through those concepts or sections, if there's something you don't understand, then that's what I'm here for. Just immediately send me a message or an email. And it doesn't have to be formal. You can just quickly say, hey, ma'am, I was reading this, and what does this mean? That's fine. You can send that to me, and then I'll help you as you go along. Okay, dokes. Anybody got any other questions in the meantime? Oh, I don't want to share a file. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong thing. Stop sharing. Okay, so now I'm going to share my screen with you. Go back here. Where's share screen? So we can have a look at that. We can have a look at that answer paper for your assignment. Let me just quickly get that out. Okay, so hopefully you guys should be able to see on the screen now our little kaleidoscope of all of my screens, and that you can now see the question paper of your first assignment. So just quickly going to zap through these so you remember what the questions were. Remember, question 1 was the 5 marks. This was the table where you had to identify each of these types of accounts, and you had to put them in the appropriate column. The question that most students got wrong was this first one over here, capital. That was the most common mistake, and consumable stores. Just about everything else was correct. Those were the 2 most common errors. So your capital account is obviously gosh, go away. Is obviously, oh, come on, work for me, please. Sorry, guys. Oh, no wonder it's not working. I'm trying to do the wrong thing. Silly. A proprietary account, and your consumable stores, that you should have ticked expense. This consumable stores is debatable in that it can, at the end of a year, if you have got consumables on hand, convert to a current asset. But during the year, every time we purchase consumable stores, if we purchase consumables, we expense them. Okay, and really none of the rest of that was a problem for anybody. That was question 1 for 5 marks. Not many marks lost there. Question 2 was this one where you had a friend from school that wants to open a business and approached you for help, and then there were these various questions that you had to answer. So in this question, they gave you a case study, a scenario. They said you are an accounting student. You have got a friend. He's asked you for help. So where they asked the question, they said, in your own words, explain to your friend how his aunt will use the financial information. So how, let me go back here, how she will use the financial information if she is an investor or a lender. So in your answer, you had to talk about okay, my friend should tell he or his aunt should do whatever. You can't just go to a textbook, find a section, paraphrase it, and give me a definition of a lender and a definition of an investor. You have not answered the question. The question says, explain to your friend how his aunt will use the financial information. And how will she use the financial information? Not what is an investor and what is a lender. So in other words, you have to say, as an investor, what will her actions and her expectations be? Okay. I'll come and answer your question in a second. I hear somebody has just posted something or put their hand up. And then the same thing for the second one, 2.2, your friend is not sure which business form to adopt. He's aware his choice, okay, will determine his exposure to risk. So again, the question was, explain to your friend, so you had to relate it to the case study, and again, how each of the following 5 factors will impact his choice. So again, we don't want a definition of a legal personality starting, etc., etc., because we know what they are. We want you to tell your friend what he needs to take into account when deciding which business form to undertake. How that factor will affect it. So I didn't mark this too strictly because a lot of you didn't do that relating of the case study to the question. But remember, I told you in the NSS and in your lesson plan, read the question carefully and answer what the question is asking. That's really important. Oopsie, sorry, I'm back at the... Did somebody put their hand up? I'm looking at the screen now. I can't see where I am now. Oh, was this you, Susie? Explain more on how capital is a proprietary account. If you go to, let me just see if I can quickly find it in your textbooks. Just want to check which learning, I think it's learning unit 2. If you go to learning unit 2 in your textbooks and you go to page 37, you will see there is a section there, proprietary accounts. And the proprietary accounts, they've got a definition, and then at the bottom of page 37, they've got their capital, and then over the page, they've got their drawings. So on page 38, they've got those are your 2 proprietary accounts, capital and drawings. Okay, so read through that section, and if you don't understand anything about that, so you know that the capital account is when a person starts a new business, there's got to be some kind of startup capital. So whether that startup capital comes from the owner's own pocket, then it is called capital. So you will go to your personal bank account and you'll take money out of there and you will go and deposit it in the business bank account. So the whole point is that the owner's personal financial affairs are kept completely separate from the business's financial affairs. You debit the bank account because you put in money into the business's bank, and you credit the capital account with the amount that the owner invested of his own money. So you'll see bank is an asset, it's got a debit balance. Capital has got a credit balance, which means that in the business's eyes, that's actually a liability, because whatever amount is in the capital account, the business, in effect, owes that money to the owner as a liability. But it's a very specific type of liability. We call it capital because it indicates that that's the money that came from the owner's own pocket.
Okay, I understand. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. And then Jamie, your ICE tasks. The ICE tasks I can show you on the Learn screen. Didn't I show you that in the last collab? I think you guys, oh no, you guys were unlucky. We went straight into assignment 1. Let me just see if I can quickly open a screen here. Just give me 1 second. Oh no, now I've got to go and log in there again. Okay, that's not going to be quick. Then I'll just talk you through it. Your ICE tasks you do on Learn itself. So log on to Learn. go to your module, click on Learning Units in your main menu down the left-hand side, and then depending on the activity number, let's say, for instance, and I'm just making this up in my head, let's say the Ask task is activity 3.2.1. On Learn, go to Learning Unit 3, which is the first number of the Ask task. That indicates Learning Unit. Then scroll down or click through to the screen Theme 2. Okay, so that will be LU3. Theme 2, and then Activity 1 in Theme 2. So when you're in Theme 2, scroll right down to the end of the theme. All of the activities are always at the end of each theme, and find Activity 3.2.1. Then depending on what the activity is, usually you click on the activity itself. There'll be a big red arrow and it'll say click here, or it will say complete this worksheet, or it will say complete this exercise and then upload your answer to this link. But it's always completed within Learn by clicking on that activity heading and then following the instructions there. No emailing, there's no other way to get an Ask task to me other than doing it online itself. And then when you guys complete the Ask tasks, I can see in the grade center that you've completed it. And then when I mark it, it will all be in the grade center and you'll be able to see what you've completed, etc., all right there on the screen. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go back to the question paper. So question 2 really, guys, and then the other thing with question 2, you will have seen that for a lot of people on your papers, references and bibliography was required. And that was on your lesson plan. It was discussed in the NSS. Specifically, I told you which questions you needed to reference. So you would have lost marks if you did no referencing at all. So that was very important, particularly for question 2. Which ownership form? There was no right or wrong answer to that, as long as you chose an ownership form. An ownership form means a sole proprietor, a PTY limited, a partnership, a limited company. That's an ownership form. And you gave a reason why you would have got those 2 marks. The 2 branches of accounting. This is also one of your learning objectives. Financial accounting and management accounting, and then you had to name them, which would be 1 mark each, and then 1 mark each for briefly explaining the differences. So the most important difference between financial and management accounting is that financial accounting is geared at providing information to the external users, people who don't work for the company, but are the investors or other users of financial information that are external to the company, whereas management accounting is specifically information that we prepare for the management, internal management of the company itself, to use to make decisions in the running of the company. And financial accounting, we prepare according to the strict IFRS accounting rules. Management accounting, we are free to do our worksheets in whatever way we want to. That's going to give our management the information that they want. I'll just finish question 2 here. Quickly explain to your friend the difference between a journal and a general ledger. So your journals are all of your subsidiary ledgers. Wrong one. Okay. So journals are a cash book. payments, cash book receipts, debtors journal, debtors allowance journal, creditors allowance, and general journal. Those are journals in which we take a source document and we enter the information from the source document into the journal in date order, in the order in which the transaction happens, so that we are collecting all cash receipts in one journal. We're collecting all cash payments in another journal. So in other words, it's the way in which we sort similar types of transactions into the same place so that we can summarize them and total them. Then the totals of those subsidiary ledgers are posted into the general ledger at the end of each month when the subsidiary ledgers are closed off. And the general ledger is what we call made up of all of the T accounts. In other words, each individual account, the bank account, the creditors control, the debtors control, the stationery expense account, the wages account, that the list of all of those accounts together make up the general ledger. Okay, let me just go and see if there was another question. Did anybody else have their hand up or want to say something? I heard no, anything? I will give you guys a chance at the end as well. Who's that? CZ?
Yes, it's me.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just had a little query before you carry on. So the proprietary accounts are between the business and the owner. So let's say that the capital contribution or the money that was put into the business was given to me by, let's say, a family member. Well, they give the business the money, not to me. So they just directly contributed the money to the business without any requirement to be repaid or anything. What would you then record that as? Would it not still be capital contribution? And then it kind of makes me think, if it is a capital contribution, can we then say that capital is a proprietary account in that sense? Because it's not exactly between the owner and the business. Now it's between another person and the business who's contributed money.
Okay, so that is a good question because it is one of those confusing things. So let's say you're in the case of your friend and his aunt. If his aunt gave, in inverted commas, the business some money, in effect, that is then a loan from the aunt to the business. If your aunt has no ownership, if she's not a partner in the business or she's not a director of the business, a Pty Limited director, but she gave you money for you to, she said, okay, here, I'll give you 50,000 Rand startup capital. You would debit the bank with 50,000 and you would credit loan account Auntie May, which is then a liability account, not a capital account. In other words, the business then owes that 50,000 to your aunt. The business doesn't owe the owner the 50,000, it owes the aunt the 50,000. In the event that your aunt, in the event that your aunt gave you, the owner, a gift of 50,000 and said, here, Msisi, I'm giving you 50,000 because I'm so happy you're starting a business and I'm proud of you. You don't have to pay me back. And you then took the gift, which she put into your personal bank account. You took it out of your personal bank account and debited it into the bank's bank account. You would then credit the capital account. Because then, in effect, your aunt first gave you the 50,000 so that it did belong to you, and then you contributed it to the business in order to start the business.
I see.
So it all depends. It all depends. Does your aunt want the money back? Debit, bank, credit, loan account, aunt.
Of course.
If your aunt gifted, and if the aunt gifted you the money, debit, bank account, credit, capital.
Yes, that's very simple to understand. I did some accounting in school a bit. I liked it.
Okay.
But so your aunt wouldn't necessarily deposit the money directly into the business's bank account if it was a gift or a startup contribution without the need to be paid back. It would directly go to you and then the business.
Well, she could. I mean, practically, she could deposit the money directly into the bank's bank account instead of going first to your bank account and then into the business. But then it would depend on what the agreement was. Does she want the money back, or has she given it to you? If she's
Okay.
given it to you, it will go into the capital account. If she wants it back at some point in the future, the credit must go to the loan account.
Okay, I understand. I just wanted to check if it would still be considered a capital contribution because from what I understand, I had a tough time deciding what account capital was, mainly because of the fact that proprietary account said it's between the owner and the business. So if a family member contributes directly into the business, it wouldn't exactly be between the owner and the business, and you wouldn't exactly call it capital. But I guess um, it's one of those tricky matters. You then just call it capital for the sake of.
Yeah. So remember, you've also got that separation of the owner and the business. So if your aunt is going to donate 50,000, she is essentially giving it to you. Not if she can't give it to the business, like just give it to the business, because something has to be credited. So if she's giving it and she doesn't want it back, then it has to be capital, because you have to debit the bank account. There's no other account that could possibly be debited. So your
Yes,
dilemma is then what account do I credit? You will
yeah,
only credit the capital account if the transaction means that that 50,000 belongs to the owner. In other words, no one else has got a claim on that 50,000 that's
besides you.
sitting in the bank account other than the owner of the business.
Okay, thank you very much, Heather. I fully understand.
Okay, pleasure. Okay, so this we go back then to question 3, calculate the profit or loss. So this was a little bit mostly done correctly. So what you had to do was you had to take, where am I here? On the 1st of December, assets minus liabilities, and work out what this amount was. And then this was the 31st of December. Remember, there was that error. Assets minus liabilities, and then work out what that amount was. So in other words, you had to work out what was the owner's equity at the beginning of the year versus the owner's equity at the end of the year. And then if the owner's equity increased, it got greater during the course of the year, then that means the business made a profit, and opening minus closing balance, which would give you this answer here, would then be a profit. If opening minus closing gave you a negative answer, then it means the business made a loss because the owner's equity was less at the end of the year than it was at the beginning of the year. So that was where a lot of students got the rand value, I think it was 6823, of the amount correct, but then they said that it was a profit. It was actually a loss because the equity total at the end of the year was less than it was at the beginning of the year. A lot of you also forgot to state, and in bold, guys, gosh, I'm always saying read everything, follow the instructions. Your answer must indicate if it's a profit or a loss. And all workings must be shown. They put it in bold. It's important. You'll lose marks if you don't do that. This was the transactions that we had to put under the accounting equation. So this one I'm going to show you on the solution because that's obviously easier. Okay, this is just the memorandum. So this is what the memorandum looks like. There was a half mark for each correct answer. If you ticked 2 blocks, you get 0 because you can't make 2 guesses and then hope one of them is correct. So there's where all of your little crosses should have been for each to get all of those. So there were 10 answers, half a mark each. Okay, so for this one over here, award marks as follows. for 2.1, 3 marks to discuss the aunt's interest as an investor, 2 marks to discuss her interest as a lender. There was 1 mark for making the answer applicable to the actual case study. In other words, referring the aunt and the friend's business and not just given what's in the textbook. Okay, so an example of how you could have worded your answer is, if the aunt is an investor, in other words, my friend's aunt will be interested in the risk inherent in returns provided by his business. She would use the information, because remember they said, how would she use the information? She'd use it to determine whether she should buy into the business, whether she should hold the investment, or whether later on she should sell her share. She'd also be interested to know if the business will be able to pay her a dividend. If the aunt makes a loan to the business, then she'll be interested if the loan and the interest attached to it will be repaid to her when it's due. Okay. So again, going back to Msizi's question, over here they're saying if the aunt is an investor, if she's an investor, it means she's becomes a part owner of the business. She's actually, she's not lending the money to the business, she's actually buying a share of the business. So she's saying, I will give you 50,000 Rand or contribute 50,000 Rand to the startup of this little business, but in return for that, I want 40% of the ownership of the company. Then both you and your aunt are owners of the business. You will each have your own capital accounts recording what your contributions to the business would be. So there would be a capital account for yourself, and there would be a capital account, sorry, not for yourself, for your friend. There'd be a capital account for your friend containing the amount he had contributed personally, and there would be a capital account for your aunt containing the amount that she had contributed personally to the business. But if your aunt said, okay, I'll give the 50,000 Rand to you as a loan and you must pay me back in 5 years' time, then the second scenario applies. Then the second section over here, where you had those 5 different aspects and you had to explain how they would affect your choice of business ownership, 1 mark per factor. And the mark is for making the answer applicable to the actual case study. Again, that was important, referring to the aunt and the friend's business and not just giving what is in the textbook. As I said, I was a little bit more lenient with that, these 6 marks. Over here, a lot of you did lose that 1 mark for not referring to the case study, but I did not deduct all 6 marks on question 2.2 if you didn't refer all of them to the case study. But you can see by the answers given here, they said, if my friend, etc., you know, they really did want you to think about, remember, you are advising your friend on what to do. You're not just writing down definitions straight out the textbook. So this stuff comes straight out the textbook in terms of. And then this one over here, it didn't matter which ownership form you chose. You were free to choose whichever one, and then you would have got those financial and management accounting, 1 mark each for naming it and 1 mark each for a description, a journal and a general ledger. Journal summarizes similar types of transactions so that there are fewer postings that end up in the general ledger, and the general ledger is our actual accounting system. That is the collection, all of the accounts. You could have mentioned all of the accounts making up the trial balance, and we prepare the general ledger from the journal. So the journals are posted into the general ledger at the end of each month. That was only 2 marks. Here is your question 3 with the profit calculation. So this memo, let me just get my copy of it, had errors in it, that and that were the wrong way round. So remember, the memo is for the markers, not for the students. So I picked up that there was an error and I let the head office know, and they corrected it in the memo. So the answer on this side was 98579. 98579. And the answer on this side was 91756. So 6823 was the difference, but you can see our equity at the beginning of the year was greater than our equity at the end of the year. The equity went down from 98,000 Rand to only 91,000 Rand at the end of the year. So that means that the business made a loss in the year of 2022. Then this one is a very tricky question, and I know, yeah, these aren't always easy. Some of you got all the account names correct and maybe made one or two errors with where the amounts go or with the calculation of the amounts. Again, just go and find that same transaction that they described in one of the questions in the textbook and have a look to see where your mistake would be. Quite a number of students got the account names correct, but then they put them on the incorrect side. So they might have said creditors control on the debit side and office equipment on the credit side. Lots of students made errors like that. So again, just if I put, let me go and have a look. If you saw this, those symbols typed next to your answer, that means that whatever you wrote on the debit side should have gone to the credit side, and whatever you wrote in the credit side should have been on the debit side. So lots of you will see those little less than or greater than symbols, and that's why I typed them there. Okay, so go and have a look in your where I've marked it, and that's what that means. Then on this side over here, you can see where the amounts are. There were two half marks. There was one half mark for getting the plus or the minus correct, and then there was another half a mark for getting the amount correct, the value correct. So if you said minus 100, you would have got half a mark for the 100, and you would have lost half a mark for getting the increase or decrease incorrect. So with this one, the most common errors that were made, bank and loan was generally correct, office equipment creditors, that was generally correct. Where's my transaction description so I can remember what these were all about? On the 5th of March, we purchased trading inventory. So our inventory is increasing, asset is increasing. So we debit the asset and it's increasing, and we credit the bank account. A bank account is an asset, so that asset is decreasing. You had to also pay attention in these transactions. Did we pay cash for the transaction, or did we purchase the whatever it was that we paid for on credit? If we paid cash, you had to credit the bank account. If the transaction was that we purchased it on credit, you had to credit creditors control. In other words, to create a liability, which means we're going to pay for it at some date in the future. And then this one over here was probably the one that the most students got incorrect, and that was the sales transaction. So we sold inventory on credit. So 17,000 Rand was the selling price, and the cost of the inventory was 5,000 Rand. So there are two transactions that we record when we sell goods. One is the sales transaction at the selling price. So we sold it on credit, so we're not debiting bank account because we didn't receive the money yet, so we have to debit debtors control. And we are crediting sales because we made a sale. We are recording income. Remember, income is increases on the credit side. So debtors control, the asset is increasing, and sales, the income account, is increasing. at the sales value, 17,000. Then we also have to record the fact that I took some inventory out of my asset account, inventory, and I recorded an expense, cost of sales. Cost of sales is an expense account, so my expense is increasing. When an expense increases, it decreases owner's equity. And when my asset inventory decreases, it decreases, sorry, I've got the wrong columns. This is the owner's equity column here. So when I've got an expense, it decreases owner's equity. And when I have less inventory, my asset inventory decreases. Because remember, the person I sold the inventory went home with my inventory. So I've got less inventory in my warehouse than I had before the sale took place. So assets inventory is decreasing at the cost price, and my owner's equity is decreasing because I incurred an expense. In order to make the sale, I had to incur the expense of giving that customer my inventory. So remember, double entry system means that there has to be on there's an equal sign here for our accounting equation. Assets equals, so this is one side of the accounting equation, and this over here is the second side of the accounting equation. So one, the left-hand side of the accounting equation, must equal the right-hand side of the accounting equation. So if I debit or increase the left-hand side by 17,000, I must also increase the right-hand side. If I decrease the left-hand side, I must decrease the right-hand side. Over here with this transaction, I increased the asset and I also decreased the asset, which means that my asset had a zero effect, which means that after that transaction, the left-hand side is still equal to the right-hand side of the equation. So remember, this is what you're always continuously doing, making sure that after each transaction, the left-hand side still exactly equals the right-hand side. Internet fees, so that's an expense. If I pay my internet fee subscription, I've got an expense in my general ledger called internet fees. It's an expense, so I'm debiting the expense account, I'm crediting my bank account. If I purchase stationery, I'm debiting the expense stationery, and I bought it on credit, so I'm crediting creditors control, which is a liability. Then the bank paid me some interest, so my bank account asset is increasing because I received the interest. My income account interest received is increasing because I received income called interest. So my asset bank is increasing and my owner's equity is increasing because I received income. The owner took inventory, so the proprietary account, which is in effect a Taatbens drawings, is increasing, and my inventory account, which is an asset, is decreasing because the owner took some of the inventory home with him. So asset is decreasing, inventory asset is decreasing, owner's equity is decreasing because I have to debit the drawings account. 29th of March, the debtor from the 7th of March paid the full amount. So on the 7th of March, I made a sale for 17,000 Rand. And it was on credit. So he has now paid me that 17,000 Rand. So I am going to increase my asset bank account by 17,000 Rand. And I am going to decrease my asset debtors control by 17,000 Rand because the amount owed to me has decreased because somebody actually paid off their account. So both of those is that one asset is increasing bank and a different asset is decreasing debtors control. Then wages, debit wages expense. with the amount of the wages and credit petty cash because we paid that out of the petty cash tin. So decrease owner's equity because that's an expense, decrease asset because petty cash is an asset. On the 31st of March, I made a part payment of 8,000 Rand. So my bank asset must decrease because I paid money out. And creditors control, meaning the amount that I owe to my supplier, which is a liability, must decrease. And then very important, the question said, required, calculate the owner's equity in the business as at the 31st of March. So you were asked, what is the closing owner's equity at the end of the month? Loads of you forgot to do that. You recorded all the transactions and you forgot that the actual required was, what is the owner's equity? So in order to be able to do that, you also had to remember to put the opening balances in the correct columns at the beginning of the month. So left-hand side equals the right-hand side. We had, I think, 2 assets. What were they? Yeah, we had 2 assets, bank and inventory, that added up to 110. And the owner's capital account, being owner's equity, was 110. So they wanted to know what was the owner's equity. So then you had to take this as your opening balance, plus or minus everything that you had written in the owner's equity column to then arrive at the closing owner's equity. So you can see there was a method mark given for that. So it didn't matter if you made some errors here, as long as you remembered to say opening plus or minus all of these transactions equals closing owner's equity. Okay, there are lots of examples of questions like this in your textbook, analyzing transactions under the accounting equation. So go back there and practice them in your workbooks. Then question 5 on the whole wasn't too badly done. The only thing that I can say for this one was a presentation. Oh my gosh, many of you gave me so many headaches in marking this because for some reason you just typed a long list of numbers. So instead of writing, you would say 3, 6, and you'd go plus 3, 1, and plus, and then equals, and then whatever the amount was at the bottom. And then I have to mark that. Have a look at what the answer looks like. You didn't have to put these 2 columns next to each other. You could have said 5.1 and then income, but then write down the name of the account that you are including in income and the amount, and the name and the amount, and the name and the amount, and the name and the amount in a table or a list, so I can see exactly what you've included and how much, and then add them up and give us a total. So the most common error to this income total was that a lot of students deducted the sales returns, which is an expense, from the sales account. So for this, they said 5.1. Let me just go to the question. They said calculate the total income and calculate the total expenses. They didn't say what is the net income. If they'd asked for the net income, then maybe you would have deducted sales returns from sales. And I know I'm not, this is debatable. Technically, maybe there is a scenario in which it would have been correct to deduct sales returns from sales. But this is the way that they gave me the memo, so I had to mark it like that. So sales returns is in essence an expense. It was the most common. A lot of you got them all correct, excepting for that, putting sales returns under expenses instead of deducting it from income. So you just had to list all of the income and then list all of the expenses. That wasn't too badly done. Current assets, most of you got that correct. Bank debtors, petty cash, cash float. Non-current assets, land and buildings, motor vehicles, equipment. This one over here was left out, financial asset. It was a non-current asset because they said that it matures only on the 31st of December 2025, which means you're going to have that asset for longer than the next 12 months. So it had to go under non-current. And then your total current liabilities, creditors control, the credit card account, that's the amount that you owe your MasterCard, and SARS, because that's the amount that you owe the receiver of revenue. Those three are current liabilities. There was only one non-current, the mortgage loan. Most of you got that correct. There weren't too many mistakes in this question. And then your profit or loss, a lot of you didn't get this correct rand value, but you still got the 3.5 marks because you correctly said income minus expenses equals profit. So as long as you took whatever answer you got for 5.1 for income, and whatever answer you got for expenses in 5.1, and you deducted them from each other, then you would have got the 3.5 marks, because that's method marking. And then owner's equity, two different formulas you could have used. Total assets minus total liabilities equals owner's equity. So again, you had to use your answers from these questions here. Okay, total assets is current plus non-current, minus total liabilities, which has been current plus non-current, equals owner's equity. Or you could have said the capital account minus the drawings for the year plus the, where's my profit? Plus my profit for the year, and that would have had to be your answer from 5.6. Capital minus drawings plus profit, that would have given you, you can see there, the same answer. If you had have said assets minus liabilities equals owner's equity, or capital minus drawings plus profit equals owner's equity, you would have got the same answer. And then for question 5.8, as long as your answers made sense, you would have got those 3 marks, but you had to specifically describe an action that the business would take that would directly have the effect of increasing sales specifically. So if you gave an action that would decrease an expense, you're talking about increasing the profit, not increasing the sales. So what action would have the effect of increasing the top line revenue, sales? Okay, guys, I know this is been quite long, but it is important to go through all of these so that you guys understand. Oh gosh, Jamie, I hope it wasn't only you. I see everybody else is still on, so I hope everybody is still here. Gavin, yeah, I've given you SARS expense. The SARS expense is a current liability, and the reason that SARS is always a current liability is because that's the taxes that we owe SARS, and we always have to pay SARS this year. We can't pay SARS in 2 years' time for the taxes. So taxes are always a current liability. Chantal, are you still there? Do you want to go ahead and ask me your question? You can ask in a chat box, or you can just open your microphone and go ahead. Are you still there, Chantal? What question?
Yes, I am. In question 4, for debit balances, I wanted to ask, where does that go on the
question 4?
Yeah, question 4, the debit balances.
Okay, let me just go back to question 4. So are you saying that if it's a debit?
No. The debit balance given in the beginning of the question. It says the following
Okay.
balances appeared in the books on 1st of March. Debit balances bank 75,000, inventory 35,000.
Okay, your opening balances. Okay, so what type of account is bank? Bank is an asset.
Yes.
Yeah. And what type of account is inventory? Inventory is also an asset account. Okay. So because bank was an asset and inventory was also an asset, we said 75,000 plus 35,000 equals 110, and that's why we put 110,000 there. So quite a lot of students actually listed them separately, and that's also perfectly correct if you had done it like that. Okay, that's not going to work. You could have typed under assets 75 and underneath that 35 to get your 110 under that column. So in this memo, they've just added them together and written it down as one amount. But that's actually those two amounts added together.
Oh, so it's the 75 plus the 35.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, pleasure. Okay, Monique, I'm assuming you're talking about some other module. Anybody know? Do you guys have another module where you've got a collab tomorrow? You can, I don't mind, you can answer in the chat box there to Monique, it's fine. Yeah, it won't be for accounting, not accounting, yeah, but I don't know if you've got a different module. I don't have access to that info, so I'm not sure. Oh, you're talking about accounting? No, not tomorrow. What makes you think that? Now you're worrying me. No, our next session for accounting is on the 24th of April. Oops, let me write that down here. Next session for accounting is 24th of April at 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. Oh, okay. Well, I hope I did type the dates correctly on that. You know, I uploaded that calendar of all our collab dates. It's on more resources and announcements. And I also did put a reminder in announcements, and hopefully I got that correct. You must always give me a shout if it looks like I've made a mistake, because I can get myself muddled up sometime. But I hope I got the reminder and the calendar correct. Yeah, so only tonight, nothing tomorrow night. Oh, one other thing also with that calendar, we have got the exam dates. PAS is out now. I must still update my calendar. So I will be adding to that collab list at least 2 more dates, one for exam revision and one for NSS for your exam paper. Okay, so there will be some dates added to, but when I did the first initial list of collabs, we didn't yet have the exam dates. So that was why the exam NSS wasn't on there. Yeah, if it says that your exam starts at 8 a.m., you have to be there at least half an hour before that, because you've got to go into the room. They'll organize where you're going to sit. You'll have to put all your stuff down on the side of the classroom. They'll have to check your ID and your student number and all of that. So definitely get there. I would say try for half an hour beforehand if possible, but not less than 15 minutes prior to 8 o'clock. And then when everybody is seated and they have said, okay, we are starting, you will then have 15 minutes reading time where you will be allowed to read through the exam paper. And then when the 15 minutes is up, then they will say, okay, guys, pick up your pens and start writing. So if the PAS says 8 a.m., that means you are supposed to, the actual exam officially will begin at 8 a.m., which means your reading time will begin. Does that help? Okie dokie. Okay, so I've popped up a question on the screen. You can just give it a quick tick, either yes or no, before you disappear for the evening. And hopefully it's going to be a yes. But if it is a no, genuinely a no, then tick a no, because it gives me an idea of the information that I'm covering in our discussions and our questions, if you have found them helpful or not. And then always, guys, I'm absolutely open to you sending me messages or emails to say, ma'am, please cover this, or do a little bit of that as we're going along. So we have got, yeah, your assignment 2 is only due in June. So we're going to have a couple of collabs to do revision of work in your learning unit 3 and 4 and for assignment 2 before we get to assignment 2. So we'll have lots of revision time coming up. Awesome, guys. Thank you. That makes me very happy. And then I will finish off for the evening. And I will see you guys next time. Thanks, guys. Cheers. Have a lovely evening. Bye.